And here we've got another episode of Time Twins. We're going to be talking about three people today: jazz trumpet legend Miles Davis, Hollywood movie starlet Marilyn Monroe, and legendary beatnik poet Allen Ginsberg. Respectively, they've got the natal moons in Scorpio, Aquarius, and Pisces, but they also all have Saturn in Scorpio, although Miles also has the moon in Scorpio, and natal Mars in Pisces, although Allen also has the moon in Pisces. First off, we're going to be talking about the Saturn return. You've probably all heard about the Saturn return. A Saturn return occurs approximately every 29 years. That is to say that Saturn makes an entire journey around the 12 signs of the zodiac and returns to the position it occupies in a given individual's natal birth chart. Saturn stations retrograde and direct while in a wide trine to the Sun, and Saturn makes one or three exact conjunctions during the course of the retrograde phase. On December 14, 1954, Allen Ginsberg flew to New York City from San Francisco to attend his brother's wedding. While in New York, he also visited his mother Naomi in a sanatorium. She had previously attempted suicide. At this point in his life, Allen was still an unpublished author. Unlike the other two characters in our story, he was not yet established in his field. He was still struggling, supporting the works of friends like William Burroughs and Jack Kerouac. Returning to San Francisco, he soon met Peter Orlovsky, who would be his partner up until the end of his life. A 42-year romance was now beginning. As Allen's trip began, transiting Venus and Saturn were conjunct his natal Saturn in Scorpio. Less than 2 months later, on February 4, 1955, Marilyn Monroe, already a well-known Hollywood movie actress, began studying with Lee Strasberg at New York's famous Actors Studio. Already a well-known movie star, she was craving respect. Recently divorced from Joe DiMaggio, she was refusing to do films for Fox because the scripts did not meet her satisfaction. She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress. At the time Marilyn began studying with Lee Strasberg, transiting Saturn was conjunct her natal Saturn retrograde in Scorpio. And just a little over a month later, on March 12, 1955, legendary jazz alto sax player Charlie Parker, otherwise known as Bird, passed away at the age of 34 because of the physical abuse he had put himself through due to drug addiction and alcoholism. Miles had begun playing with Charlie back when he was 18 years old, and although he learned everything he knew about jazz from the man, there was also a lot of resentment. At the time Charlie Parker died, transiting Saturn retrograde was conjunct Miles's natal Saturn retrograde and moon in Scorpio. Just over 6 months later, on September 27, 1955, John Coltrane joined the Miles Davis Quintet. Miles was a recovering drug addict, clean for about 2 years. However, the other 4 members of his group were still heroin users, and Miles would struggle to keep them all in line as they made music history. Coltrane would be in Miles's group for the next 5 years, and during that time, he would transform himself from a mediocre drug-addicted musician to an absolute powerhouse. At this same time, Miles had recently signed to Columbia Records. He was now becoming the highest-paid jazz musician. Transiting Saturn was conjunct Miles's natal moon and Saturn retrograde in Scorpio, and also John Coltrane's natal Saturn in Scorpio. 2 weeks later, on October 7, 1955, Allen Ginsberg debuted his new poem Howl at a reading at a place called Gallery 6 in San Francisco. The reading is now legendary, accounted for in writings by Jack Kerouac and others. The poem is Saturnian in that it mourns young people who met tragedy. At the time of the reading, transiting Saturn was conjunct Allen's natal Saturn retrograde in Scorpio. And then less than a week after the reading, on October 13, 1955, Marilyn Monroe, still in New York, went to see a Broadway show called Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, starring a new blonde starlet named Jayne Mansfield. It was clear that the character Jayne Mansfield was playing was a spoof of Marilyn Monroe's screen persona. It must have been tough for Marilyn, struggling at that time to be taken seriously as an actress, to see herself parodied right in front of her face. At the time she saw the show, transiting Saturn was conjunct her natal Saturn retrograde in Scorpio. In these 3 cases, whether it was Marilyn Monroe, who was already close to the top of her success, Miles Davis, who had already enjoyed success, fallen, and was reinventing himself, or Allen Ginsberg, who up until this time always been anonymous, our 3 characters, feeling their Saturn return, were pursuing the goals that were most important to them, and regardless of what they had already achieved, felt like they were starting over from scratch. And now we're going to talk about Venus retrograde. Venus stations retrograde 5 times during its 8-year synodic cycle. Venus retrograde phases occur once every 18 months, and the Venus retrograde period lasts approximately 40 days. On June 5, 1956, Miles Davis began recording his first LP under his new record contract with Columbia Records, an album called Roundabout Midnight. Miles was now moving into the big leagues. Transiting Venus was retrograde in Cancer, and transiting Mars was now pre-retrograde in Pisces. A few days later, on June 9, 1956, Allen Ginsberg's mother Naomi died. Transiting Venus was retrograde in Cancer, Mars was pre-retrograde in Pisces. Allen last saw his mother just after the last Venus retrograde period in Scorpio at the end of 1954, and his next great poem, Kaddish, would be about her. And a couple of weeks later, on June 29, 1956, Marilyn Monroe married the playwright Arthur Miller. Transiting Venus was now retrograde in Gemini, and Mars was still pre-retrograde in Pisces, the Mars sign for all three of our principal characters. And speaking of Mars retrograde, Mars stations retrograde approximately every 26 months. The retrograde period lasts approximately 3 months. Mars always goes retrograde in Cancer, Leo, and Virgo once every 15 to 17 years. Retrogrades in the other 9 tropical signs are more rare. On August 7, 1956, in London, Marilyn began work on a movie called The Prince and the Showgirl, co-starring Laurence Olivier. While the film work was rewarding, Marilyn continued to generate a reputation of being difficult to work with, although the role did showcase the work she had put into improving her craft. As the movie began filming, transiting Mars was now just about to station retrograde in Pisces. Just over a month later, on September 10, 1956, Miles Davis recorded the second session for his Roundabout Midnight album. At the same time, he had to wrap up his old record contract obligations, and soon after this session, wound up doing marathon recording sessions to complete his contract with them. At this point, he was dealing with the drug problems in his band and would eventually fire 2 members temporarily, including John Coltrane. As this recording session happened, Mars was now retrograde in Pisces, conjunct Miles's natal Mars in Pisces. Just over a month after that, on October 30, 1956, Allen Ginsberg was in Los Angeles doing a reading. The famous French writer Anaïs Nin was in the audience, and Allen wanted to make an impression, so while reading his poetry, he stripped naked. It was a real coming out for the normally shy Allen, and in the years to come, he would be known for getting naked on many occasions. However, as far as anyone knows, this is the first time he did it in public. At the time of his strip show, transiting Mars had just finished its retrograde phase in Pisces and was close to conjunction to his natal Mars in Pisces. Period of August to October of 1956 is the only period in the life of all 3 of our principal characters that transiting Mars was ever retrograde in Pisces, their natal Mars sign. And it's remarkable that all 3 characters experienced such a tremendous artistic ascension during this brief window in time. This selection of stories demonstrates the power of observing planetary synodic cycles in tandem with an individual life.